Kraken. My instant thought was, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
So there have been a number of high-profile rebrands or brand launches recently in the sports world, among them Washington football team, formerly known as the Redskins, the Seattle Kraken, Racing Louisville FC, Charlotte FC, and then even the Icelandic national soccer team. So today, I want to chat with y'all about the branding implications of these launches. So let's start with the Redskins. In response to public pressure to change the name, they recently announced that they'll play the 2020 season as Washington football team. What do you think about this approach and what they've done in this case?
Well, I mean, I think there are three components to this, and I know Cynthia's got thoughts on it, and Brittany. But one, there's the actual change that they're making. The why and all that piece, which should be something that's considered anytime you do a brand identity, or especially as change. The second is this interim step that they're taking, which is the Washington football team. And I know in a lot of the circles that I listen to and a lot of the sports talks, they're taking a pretty good beating. I think even LeBron weighed in on it. But the reality is it's actually not a bad approach. The ability to really do the affinity to the city that they're in, and then jump into whatever an identity is or a mascot would be, as opposed to sticking with a mascot that, right now it's just cultural dynamite, and has been an issue for years for them, and watching them struggle with it has been a challenge. So they're like these two components that are kind of interesting, is to they have to make a change, and that you really need to do it now. But then the idea of having this interim step, which is, I think, pretty thoughtful, and associating it with the city that they're actually representing, because that's where you want people to love you anyway. So, and then keeping the colors, which from an affinity standpoint makes the most sense. So there are a lot of nice things, but that gives them time to then really think through making a change, because they were adamant that was not going to happen for a long time. And, obviously that's just not, it's not going to be able to stick anymore.
Agreed. And I think that it's the nice part about, using this kind of current solution, like what they're currently doing. I think it gives them time to kind of really think through strategically how they want to approach their brand going forward, versus it just kind of being like willy-nilly and just kind of like, okay, this works. Because when you think about sports, it's like, this is people's lives and culture, near and dear to their hearts, things that they're passionate about. So you can't take that lightly. And it's I think a good response. It's something that probably could have been dealt with earlier. It wasn't, but now it's like, to take a little bit of time to think about it. It's a good move. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if they were, once they made the announcement, if they were reactive and hastily tried to pick a new name, I think they could have definitely risked alienating a lot of their fans, people who both wanted the name to stay and also people who wanted it to be changed. They could have lost all of them. So I think it is a good move to, of course, take the time and change it intentfully and do the research and make sure that it reflects the values of the city and the people and what they love about the sport.
Mm-hmm. You had to guess behind the scenes, what is going on? What are they strategically thinking about? What are the questions that they're asking as they go through this process to look at introducing a new identity?
I mean, they're probably thinking, okay, are we going to lose equity? What could we gain by doing this? Goodwill, on all sides. The challenge in today's world is everything. I wouldn't say polarized, but everything's so 50-50, where you have people that fall on one side of the issue or the other side of the issue. If it gets to 60-40, that's amazing. So 50% of your audience is going to be upset with the change. 50% of the audience is going to be happy with the change. There's probably a 20% piece of this audience right now that's, okay, while I'm not happy and losing my old Redskins that I grew up with, this has to change. And so this is the right time. I mean, you have to do it now. To Cynthia's point, it should have happened years ago. And I'm a nostalgic I mean, I'm a nostalgic sports guy. I don't change this stuff. I don't take this stuff lightly at all. But the reality is, this is the time to do it. And I think they're thinking that. Are they going to lose some opportunity? But also, what opportunities can they gain? Can they tap into something in their past that's even better? Can they tap into? Can they grab this period of time and history and really build an affinity for them that they didn't have before? And there are all kinds of things that they should be asking. I don't know what other questions you guys think they should be asking.
Yeah, I think that I think we're kind of at this transformative moment, like culturally within the country, but also like when you think about demographics, like, people who are like possibly aging out. And I'm talking about people who have like financial implications here, people who have money, and the disposable income that, it's like the ability to like invest in, watching sports and everything else. But anyway, it's changing. So it's like, you have to look at this probably younger demographic and kind of how they communicate with brands and probably also the teams that they love. So it's like, it's not just a passive audience that just sits there in front of the television set and watches stuff. It's like, these are people who want to engage with the team and want to engage with the brand. So if there was ever a moment beyond just the kind of like cultural issues, to kind of reimagine your brand as a team, now's the time to do it. It's like, it's amazing. So it's like they can be there at the forefront, and instead of looking at this really kind of like, oh, did we kind of, succumb to the whatevers of certain groups of people? It's like, this is a great opportunity. It's like, grab it and go,
Right.
do something new.
Yeah, I do think that's a question that they are definitely having to face. Is like, do we play it safe and go somewhere that feels kind of close to where we are, but like a subtle evolution of it, or do we change it completely? Which is a big question. And I think that it would be really interesting to see what it would look like if they did change it completely. Because I think if they were to like be timid and play it safe and change it subtly, you kind of just risk looking like you are not doing it with heart, or kind of just like succumbing to the pressure that people have put on you. But by kind of just being bold and going out there, I think you could win the hearts of, the people who didn't want it to change and the people who do want it to change, as long as it really speaks to like capturing the essence of the city and like the passion of the fans. And if they could do it that way, then I think they'll be successful.
It'd be something so much richer than it's ever been.
Well, and I think to that point, even if there is a percentage of people that are like, you're going to take this hat out of my cold dead hands, the reality is that 100% of the people get it. It's not, not 100% of the people agree, but 100% of the people get it. And this might be the only time that brand could make this shift with almost no repercussion.
Yeah.
And so, there's going to be blowback. There's going to be, oh, I can't believe Daniel Snyder held on to it for as long as he did. Why did they do that for so long? But the reality to it is, this is, Kyle, this is like the time, to Cynthia's point and what Brittany was just talking about. This is the time, with the changes in culture, with the way people interact with the brands, with the way that they share information and talk about things, with their association. You don't want to be the guy on Twitter that's getting beat up because you have a Redskins logo on your Twitter feed. There's just all that's a part of it, right or wrong, good or bad, whatever your belief is. And that this is the time. If they're going to make this change, now's the time to do it.
Where does brand research or customer research come into play when making decisions like this? Because Bo, you pointed out they have equity. They have older fans who have this affinity for the colors and this team and this name, and it's going to be difficult to change their minds. It seems like there's not going to be one approach that's going to make everyone happy. But is a quantitative piece to this important, and why?
I don't know that, honestly, I don't know that quantitative matters here. And that's going to sound really strange. It's not like research doesn't matter, right? I mean, they've got all the data about what colors people buy and all that kind of stuff. But this is passion. This is people's this is a Washington Redskins fans' passion.
Right.
How do you measure that? Right. And it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be all different kinds of depths. It's going to be tied to losses and wins and things that happened and who I watched it with when I was 12 years old. And it's not measurable. When it comes to that kind of thing, it's immeasurable, the value that it holds in someone's heart. I mean, you being a Cleveland fan and me being a Houston fan, I mean, it's all bound up in watching the Oilers blow it against Buffalo. I mean, it's and watching that with my dad and watching that for the first time, watching the Oilers for the first time with my wife at the house during Christmas. I mean, it's just all that stuff is not measurable. To the point of making a decision like this.
That's a very good point, Bo, because it's like sports, you're kind of like it's moving away from like what I think you would traditionally do for a commercial type brand. And it's like, it's on par for some people, close probably to religion, because it's like people are so committed and so passionate, and there's so much emotion rolled into teams and brands. Like, folks who are like committed fans of their home team where they may have not won a World Series ever, or not for very long, and people keep on going, or
right.
Football teams where it's like it's just nothing but heartbreak, but that's a part of our culture, dealing with a heartbreak or wins, but yeah, it's like, how do you measure that? It's
I mean, you can measure the kind of weird stuff. Sorry, Brittany, you can measure the little things.
Yeah,
but I don't know, Brittany.
I was just going to say, I think more of the like qualitative, like we do voice of customer research for some of the brands that we work on. And I think that's where the real color and like meaning would come out, is hearing the stories of the people who love the Redskins and what they've loved about the brand historically, what they love about Washington and just that general area. Like a lot of that could add meaning to a new logo for them.
Yep, absolutely.
So we started on the East Coast, and I want to take us west now. So in the hockey world, the identity of the newest NHL franchise was announced as the Seattle Kraken. And it was actually announced, I think, last week that they are now the NHL's best-selling expansion identity launch ever. So it's clearly resonated with people. But from the colors to the logos to the typography, what do you think about their visual identity?
Well, one, who doesn't love an octopus, especially a Kraken?
I know. The way you said that, Kyle, it's like that already had passion. We know what you think.
My jersey's on the way.
I would say just like looking at it just from as a designer, it's like it's really an awesome looking brand. It just looks cool, but also it's got this nice kind of modern feel to it. And I think it's like having lived in Seattle for a little while, there's like little snippets in there that I notice in there, like with the possible, I think it looks like a Space Needle in there, which ties it back into the local area, the city, and just it being by the water. So it's cool, and it speaks to that area. I'm not sure about like the actual fans, if they're like, yes, Krakens, but if you have to latch on an animal to a waterside city, why not a Kraken?
Well, and it follows a lot of the kind of the blues, and I mean the same thing that the Mariners have always had, the same thing that the Seahawks have had. I mean, I didn't think about that in our prep, but I mean it's like, oh, okay, it's sea mist and blue. Oh, wait, the Seahawks are blue and
green,
and the Mariners are blue and green.
Right.
I mean, it's like, okay, there's kind of a familial thing going on here. Okay, that's cool.
That's right.
The one thing, when you said it though, when Cynthia said "Go Kraken," I mean, I was like, that's the one thing in our prep that we didn't even consider, because we looked at the identity, and separate, the design is beautiful. It's very well executed. It's done well. To Cynthia's point, there's an anchor icon that they use that has a Space Needle in it. I mean, there's some really nice pieces to this. So the red eye and the S, it makes a great icon for a hat. I mean, I almost want to buy the hat, no matter, I haven't seen it yet, but what does it look like? But I do think, man, go Kraken.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's cool.
Release the Kraken.
I don't know, man.
I love
Astros.
You know me. I love
You know, go Oilers, go Texans, go Kraken.
Go Krakens.
I mean, it'll work. You know, go Mariners. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting. I hadn't thought about the audiology of it. I mean, the sound part of it, which is something that you should consider anytime you know, as Washington. That's one of the challenges, right? It's like, go Washington. We are the Washingtons. You know, I mean, it's kind of like,
Go
what do I do
team.
there? So there is the how it sounds when you say it.
Yeah.
I think it's an important part of sports branding or any kind of branding activity, because and we do this with naming. When we do naming, it's the same thing. It's like, how is that going to roll off the tongue? It's easy to say. I mean, does it make me feel good when it comes out of my mouth? You know, go Seahawks. You know, and maybe they said the same thing about Seahawks. I mean, come on. Maybe it's Kraken, Seahawks. I guess maybe it is.
Yeah. It's a little bit easier than the killer whales, you know.
Well, poor Stanford, right? We're the Cardinal. What does that mean?
With
color.
a tree as a mascot.
Yeah, we're the Go Trees.
My college mascot was a bumblebee, so it's like But I totally agree. I think the system is just so smart and has so many layers to the story. Like, no matter why you love Seattle, I feel like you would probably have a reason to love that logo, because they cleverly worked in a lot of different layers there with the Kraken, but also kind of like a vessel. Like the ship with the S is kind of beveled to look like a ship. All the way to like the tentacle in the negative space, which hits on the Kraken with the little eye there. I mean, they work in a lot of layers to that story that it looks so good. I mean, it's just a great brand. And I think that's what, like when we were talking about heritage before, why it could have so much richness, just like kind of digging into the heart of the city and trying to bring that out. Because people are there for a reason. So like, play with that.
Right.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with that. And even to your point, Bo, about it being geographically, it's like a family. Even the soccer team, the Sounders, is like a green and blue. And I didn't even think about that, but it's clearly meant to tie into all those four teams to connect in some way, which is really, really cool. Shifting gears a little bit to soccer. I want to take a look at the identity that did get a lot of buzz recently in the NWSL, so the Women's Professional Soccer League, of Racing Louisville FC. And this was a recent launch. Would love to break that one down. What did you think about their identity and their approach?
Personally, I did not think it was very interesting, but it technically works because, I mean, the Florida League, I was reading a little bit about this. They had a press release, and basically they asked their fans, like, what do you want this to say? Like, how do you want this to feel? And what they wanted to do with the logo was tie it into the city, kind of like what we were saying with the other teams, which is purple and Florida Lee. And like, they nailed that. That's exactly what ties them, I think, visually, the way they kind of see Louisville. There's a lot of like visual similarities there. It ties into the other teams in the city. I kind of felt like the execution just felt a little like lazy on it, honestly, but I mean, it works. Like it's not a bad logo.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brittany. It's like, looking at it, I'm like, they probably could have done so much more with it. It's like, I look at it, I'm like, great first pass, now push it, you know. I want to see more on it. I'm like, I've had enough of the X thing on logos, and I kind of get why it gets overused all the time. You know, but yeah.
Yep. I mean, thinking through football club identities and logos, and Kyle, you kind of kicked a couple out when we were doing prep, but you know, this one, it wants to fall in line with the whole crest kind of idea, and it's nice, but then you have to start to think, okay, and again, I'm not a huge, you know, European football fan, right? So it's, you know, I'm gonna fall to the Saints, right? And so if this is a U.S. soccer team, who owns, back to brand equity, who owns the Florida League? While it makes perfect sense for Louisville, I mean, we're talking French, it's Louisville. It just doesn't, like, there's been years of equity built up in that fleur-de-lis for the Saints that it's hard. Now that Louisville uses it, it shows up in their identity, but then when you try and add horse racing to soccer, it just doesn't, there's a lot going on. And I think that, back to Cynthia's point, it's like, could you have conceptualized this a little bit differently? Because you don't want to refer to a soccer team as a bunch of horses. I mean, it just doesn't. There are just all kinds of problems with this that I see could happen. And so to Brittany's point and to Cynthia's point, I think they had to dumb it down a little bit, and almost they made something very simple super complex, both from a design standpoint and then adding the idea of racing into Louisville with football club, with the crest, with the fleur-de-lis. I mean, it's just like, it's a cacophony of visual and verbal pieces that are like, wow, there's a lot in that. I mean, the color's great and the color works really nicely. Mm-hmm. It's just, to Cynthia's point, there's a lot going on in that very simple logo that, like, oversimplified. Right. It's weird. It's just, I'm having a hard time with it.
I agree. It kind of feels a little bit like possibly designed by committee, or trying to make it's too much. So.
Well, they did do a unique launch video where they actually offer the explanation of the colors and all the individual pieces that ended up making the logo, which I thought was a really effective and interesting approach to roll this out and connect on that level with the city itself. So they're explaining why they made these decisions in the process, even if maybe they missed the mark a little bit.
Well, but I think, Kyle, one thing that I don't know if you guys, but in design school, if you got to explain it, then it missed. Yeah, I think that's one thing that designers, anybody that's developing a brand identity, I mean, it's even when we present them. I mean, I love the stories we read, but my style of presentation is typically option 1, 2, and 3. Thoughts? Because if it doesn't strike them right off the bat, and you have to explain it, is there something in the way, of the communication that's needing to happen? Like when you pull it all the way back to the Redskins, and again, it's hard to even say that word right now in the current environment, and just with all the baggage that it carries. Mm-hmm. The general idea of the person that picked that brand identity was fierce, rough, fight you till the end. This is what we want to be known for. Now, whether it was done in a stereotypical or racist way is a whole nother story, but that's what they're trying to capture. So with this, are we trying to capture the feel of the club? Or are we just trying to capture the feel of the city and hope that everybody gets behind it? It doesn't give the club an identity, right? Right now, it's just a bunch of Louisville stuff put on a purple circle. So, at that point, it's great. This club then will have to establish what it means. And what people are trying to do, like the Texans and the Bull, or the Jaguars and the, they want to be fast and rugged and rough, or they want to be quick and there's that kind of thing. But the benefit to this is it's a blank canvas for this team too. They can establish any style and it doesn't get weird.
Right. To me, it's like, even so, but usually when we develop marks, it's like we want to make sure that it works. It can be deconstructed and you can still look at it and understand who they are. So it's like, mm-hmm. This logo, it's like everything's like locked in together. I can't pull this apart, and some logos are like that. But, another test for this is like, does it work large scale? Does it work very small? So even from little things like that, little technical perspective like that, like, I don't know how far down I can shrink this down, where it's like, then the name, everything gets super tiny. It's just kind of, mm-hmm. So that's on the practical side. So,
right.
I think this is a unique challenge for soccer clubs and developing identities, because there's so much precedent and influence from across the pond, and we're mm-hmm. trying to get up to speed here, right, and play into what is at the heart of American sport identities, which is vastly different than what people connect with on an international level. So there's this
Right.
tension all the time in, do we play to a system that is much more international, European, this has been this way for decades, or do we try and integrate that with the American sports landscape? So it's definitely a tension that NWSL has felt and MLS, which leads me into the next one that I want us to cover, and that's Charlotte FC. And MLS has done some really interesting, they actually have a position dedicated to brand development at the MLS because their goal is to continue to expand the league. And so his name's David Bruce, and he, in an interview recently, said, for us to be successful, we have to carve out what is right for the local marketplace to lean into and what makes that city special. So that goes back to a little bit of what we were just talking about with Louisville, wanting to connect with the locality where they're based, which seems to be a good strategy because it's about managing perception and your local community. But he also said, we look at other sports leagues and then try and do the polar opposite, which again is this tension of, do they cater to precedent from European leagues and international leagues, or try and integrate into the American sports landscape? What do you think about this recent launch? Does it reflect that approach to be different? Does it stand out in any way?
This is a podcast, right? So all my noises don't really say anything.
Well, is it groundbreaking, or it's, it feels a little bit like, it's another button with tiny type and something in the middle. So, and as far as it being unique, specifically to that city, to Charlotte, I'm not sure if the crown is, we see crowns everywhere. So, yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what the reaction was from the fan base. So,
yeah, I read a little bit about this one too, and I think like they're trying to say a lot with this, and I think the story beneath it and what they were trying to say is interesting. Like they also try to hit on the heritage of the city, being like a queen city, so it's named after I think it was Queen Elizabeth, whoever was married to Queen or King George. Oops, this is documented that I don't know. But so the crown is there for that. So that makes sense. And I know like the kind of circle shape was supposed to represent a coin because of it being like financial capital. So like when you read the story beneath it, I see why they made some of the design decisions that they did. However, when you look at it, it looks like a circle badge. And none of that's like rich heritage and kind of like story tied to the region really comes through for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think like also I kind of get BMW at a glance too, which is kind of like high end. So I don't know if that was a tone they were going for, something that feels like high end or like elegant, but I don't know. I didn't really read that and kind of like what the story that they were trying to communicate. So I don't know. I mean, in summary, I think it has like really great meaning behind it, but I feel like they didn't do the best job at hitting that emotion and communicating that story behind it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'd have to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Cynthia. No, go ahead, Cynthia.
I was just going to say, it's like, even if you go with the crown, it's like, there's probably a million just different ways you could work with that crown shape, or you could treat it typographically, or it could be just, go all out, do something that's really garish, or so it's just something, it's like,
Yep. Well, what are you trying to achieve? I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of this soccer, again, the idea of a crest and these shields and the different things that were developed 100 years ago when soccer clubs started playing or football clubs started playing each other. that's great and all, but in today's world, like we're talking about the Redskins with social media and how, gear and things have become more fashion statements and different things like that. You have to take that into consideration, and so that crest needs to be pretty awesome, and I think the one thing the Colorado Rockies have always, that was always just a disaster. That logo with a CR on the hat was just you can't put a C because they're Cubs, right? And you could put an R maybe, but I think the problem is when they lock up the CR, those two letter forms just don't work together. It's always looked horrible. The designer in me just cringes every time I see one of their hats. And when you look at this, the CLT thing, it's the same thing. They've tried to kind of jam these different things in, and it's just not working. And I don't mean that. I mean, God, I hate critiquing design because I don't know everything that went into it. But if the stated goal was to develop something if the stated goal of the MLS is to develop identities that are edgy and taking the best of all different worlds, this one didn't do that. The overused crown, tiny type, trying to put different things and wrapping it into a what would be a seal, and then put your football club. I mean, and then like a jam football club on there. It's like, come on, man. Let's be a little bit more. Let's give somebody. I mean, like to your point, I don't really care about the Kraken, but I kind of want a hat. I mean, they're pretty cool, and I don't do that lightly. I only wear hats and people that I cheer for. So, I mean, that's the emotion you want it to affect. And this doesn't do that. I mean, the people in Charlotte will be excited about it. They'll wear the gear. They'll buy the stuff. But I don't know how fired up they're going to be to wear it out at night. Unless they're winning. Winning changes everything. This logo means a lot more unless what they win.
Yeah.
And I think another thing too is like differentiation, because if you've got like 15, 30, 100 teams out there and everybody's got the seal thing, they all start looking the same. So the differentiation is missing. So it's like I might mistake my home team for Charlotte, and it's kind of like, versus it's like if we've got something, it's a really strong identity, a really strong brand, and they speak a certain way, everything that ties into that local community and the culture. Wow, man. So then you have something special. So
right.
So now I want to take us across the pond to Iceland, and their rebrand of their national soccer team got a lot of positive reception as well recently. Break down their approach to me. This is something completely different. It's not that typical crest that they went with. What do you think about what they did?
Yeah. In our prep, this was definitely it's the Kraken, and then they're right there.
I know. I would love to see them go head to head.
Oh yeah.
Of branding.
Killer brands go head to head on the field. Yeah, I would say, going back, all the things we've talked about, like the past, culture, the people, the brands that tell the story about the place where they come from, their origin, and just this cleanliness that it's like that tells a story about that team. Oh my gosh, this logo has it all. And anyway, I could just go on and on about this. So
yeah, but I think it does what, I mean, it gives them a lot of different elements to pull out. The main logo or icon is a Viking and I don't know if it's a bison and dragons, and it taps into both the spirit of the land and it's executed in a way that every time you look at it, you see something different. But it holds together enough to where it's like, okay, that's Iceland Football Club. I mean, that bang, that's easy to see. It's a really nice thing. Sorry, I pulled it up earlier, but there's a shirt where they pulled out the Viking and they pulled out the
bull.
Yeah, the bull. Sorry, they pulled out the bull, or they pulled out it works.
Yeah,
it absolutely works. Where you can see a stadium of people with different kind of iconography,
Yeah.
all relating to their heritage, that all feels the same.
Yeah.
And so I just think that even the whole, the whole execution, I mean, gosh, the water bottles are even cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a really nice execution.
Hmm. Which goes back to this whole thing when we're like looking at these button type or little badge type logos where it's like it has to be together for it to work. And this is a great example of it being the mark itself is a system that can be pulled apart and it still retains its strength as a total brand. It's not gonna, it won't fall apart from that. So that in my mind is like just a really smart mark and brand.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a modern evolution of a crest too. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always have to be a seal and a circle to
Circle
feel
or
like
a shield.
yeah, to feel like a family crest. And I think that's a part of the story that they wanted to tell, something that showed their unity as a team, and as a country. And so working in kind of like a modern crest idea, I think is really smart. And just the way they were able to work in the four like guardians, Icelandic guardians, I think I have so much respect for the way that was drawn, because it's really hard to make things out of lines, especially only two angles of lines, and they were able to represent like four different characters there, and it has this like distinct mood to it when you look at it too. It's which I think is some of the reactions that we had to the other logos that we looked at. You didn't get a mood when you looked at it. You kind of had to work to figure out what it meant. Here, even though off the bat, if you don't know that they have four guardians, you still have a sense of like who they are from like a passion standpoint. And I think that's still powerful, and that's still communicating in some way. And I mean, I love like the weird dagger typeface too. It's like very runic and like ancient feeling. And there's like ice shards, and I mean, oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like all over the place, but it really works somehow. Like that's
Yeah, they're coming to get you. I mean,
Yeah.
they're absolutely coming to get you.
Which is cool. It's like it's rugged but very elegant all at the same time. It's a nice balance. And it's kind of got that X in there, but it's integrated with all the lines, and it's just anyway, yeah, really nice mark, nice brand.
And it tells that story. The brand launch video is something else. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, it makes you kind of want to go run through a wall, actually. It talks about their heritage and the four different symbols that they've integrated into this one mark. And it's a story, and it's cohesive, and it's authentic. And even as someone, I have no connection to Iceland, but I felt a connection in some way to what the story that they were telling.
Right. Well, and I think that you tapped into something there, Kyle, authenticity, right? I mean, I think, a logo needs to tell a story, an identity needs to tell a story quickly, right? It needs to have some sort of differentiator, to Cynthia's point. It needs to have some sort of, it just can't look like everything else. It can be the same kind of icon. It can be a crown, but does that crown look completely different than any other crown you've seen? But then there's this authenticity piece, right? And I think all of these, the great thing is when you watch their videos and you think about their brand and stuff, they are authentic to the area, but the execution isn't authentic to the need in all cases, right? I mean, it's not just they're a Charlotte sports team that needs to be known for something, right? It's not just the Icelandic football club. It's they represent the whole country, I mean, and they want to be known for something. And I think that was, I don't know, was it, which one was it? Norway, which is the one that's bright orange?
The Netherlands.
Netherlands. I mean, that the color itself fits them. I mean, they play a fast game, a smart game, quick soccer. That orange streaking up and down the field, just that color alone fits them. It's just that there are those kinds of things that you think about a little bit, and sometimes it's hard for style because you don't know, a new manager may come in, or somebody may come in and change that. But that's always part of it, right? That's a little bit of it. Like, what kind of style do we plan on playing? What kind of feel do we want? What kind of feel does the city? I mean, the Oilers were the Oilers. It was like a tough, hard working, and the guys the people on the team were hard living cowboys. I mean, and it all fit. The whole identity fit. That's when all that comes together, and then the team performs, that starts to really build the brand over time.
Yeah.
But this captures the culture and the type of thing it's trying to communicate, which is excellence in athletics, like, so well.
Yeah.
So we'll end on this. A brand is more than a logo, but why is it important for businesses, sports or otherwise, to have a cohesive and authentic visual identity?
I think consistency, I think there are a couple pieces. One, it needs to be authentic. It needs to represent the city that they represent, or at least a feeling or a region. There's a piece to that on the sports side of things. Same kind of thing from a corporate standpoint. A brand should represent that company's core values. Everybody's got a mission statement. The brand that's developed should represent that. And then it comes down to differentiation, execution. How should all of those things feel? And then there's the tactical, back to what we were talking about with the quantitative piece of the Redskins. Is it something that people, I think in both cases, whether it's a corporation or it's a sports brand, is it something people want to buy?
Yeah.
Is it something people want to, and on the sports brand standpoint, is it something that they want to wear on a hat, and they want to, there's a big economic piece to this, but it's the same way on the corporate side. Is it something that I as an employee want to buy? Is it something that I as a customer am going to buy into? Maybe not wear the hat and just shirt, although we see it all the time, but because that's usually people just want free swag. But the reality is, I got to buy into the culture. In both cases, am I buying into the culture to the point where I'm going to spend either, my career capital on that brand, or I'm going to spend my money on that brand and I'm going to buy into it. And I think those are some things to consider as you're looking at that growth.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Brittany.
I was just gonna piggyback off of what Bo was saying about culture. I mean, without a cohesive identity outside of just the logo, you need something to build off of. And so having a cohesive identity that does extend past the logo and comes through in anything that they create, as far as campaigns, how the spaces are branded, what the experience feels like when you go to a game, what all of the swag stuff looks like. I mean, all of that is kind of tied into that goes into building a cohesive brand. So you're kind of building that look and feel. And so without that starting point, everything could look disjointed and people may not understand the story or be able to connect with it. I think there's like a big emotional piece there. So when you're creating something that's consistent, people just have something to believe in, have something that they can rely on. And it also gives you another platform to know what your campaign should look like over time. I mean, like every year they're going to be creating new things, and you want it to look cohesive so that way people can recognize you and remember you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. Because it's like going from, so one thing being a company in the application of your brand beyond just the logo, it's like, this is where it's like visual, style guides, the guides for the brand are so important because of all the applications. It even goes beyond what the franchise itself is doing, but to the city and communications and, product merchandising, like getting it out on, like, they're not even the ones producing it, like other people are producing it. And it's like, it's so important because otherwise it's like your brand could end up unraveling, because it's a million different hands. So the importance of having that nice, tight, cohesive type of identity is and having it be controlled is so important, or you could lose control of it. So.
Mm-hmm.
This was awesome, guys. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat about all this. It's two topics that I'm really interested in, obviously on the sports side, and then on the visual identity side. I think it's so interesting to see strategically the decisions that sports teams make as they're trying to connect and build an audience. So really interesting topic. Go Kraken.